So today we're going to go paperless, and this is my personal experience over the past almost 12 years of doing so. So there'll be a lot of content that I have actually done for my own use. So we'll be talking about what paperless is about, why should you go paperless, is this for a personal or personal use, or is it for a business? What are the benefits of going paperless? What are the drawbacks? Because yes, there are some drawbacks. How to get started? How should you plan your routine? Because it is a routine. You need to be organized. And finally, you need to have a backup plan. Actually, finally, what will you do with all that paper that you have eliminated? So let's start with what is paperless? Well, when you still have paper, it may look like this or like that. And this little guy on the right doesn't seem very happy. So going paperless is trying to replace those two things with this or that. Yes, of course, a clean desk is a lot more attractive and also reduces stress. So paperless is the art of eliminating all that file cabinet clutter. Or is it really? Well, not quite. It's more like reducing that clutter. You can't quite eliminate it. There will be things that will remain on paper probably forever. But it will reduce the paper that's going to come into your house as well as the paper that leaves your house. It's about performing transactions online and plenty more. So why go paperless? As I mentioned a minute ago, it reduces stress. And I can tell you that from experience. It will solve that bulging cabinet, file cabinet problem. It will reduce all that snail mail coming to your house and the one leaving your house. By the same token, you will save some money because you will reduce the stamps, and I've almost eliminated stamps in my house. It's about paying bills online, so no more paper checks. It's about paying bills automatically. You got to watch out for those auto enrollment. And of course, no more paper bills that are still due. And of course, you're going to save trees and help the environment. And there are probably many other reasons to go paperless. So is this for personal or business? Everything that I will be talking about here applies to a personal. It also applies to a business. There are obviously different consideration to be taken into account for a business. So the best practices may be more stringent, but I will not cover the business side of things here, just the personal side. So what are the benefits? You're going to avoid fees for paper statements. Some service providers now, to force you to go to paperless, or e-statement, as they call it, will charge you a fee if you want a paper statement. So you will eliminate that. You will be able to pay on the due date and not a day before, because you don't have to allow for the Postal Service delays. You can stop worrying about late payments for the same reason as what we just mentioned above. You will reduce your need for stamps. So then, as I said, I have almost eliminated the need for stamps in my house. You will reduce the incoming paper mail, and that's a pretty significant thing. In my case, the junk mail used to be about 40% of what I was coming in. Now it's probably 95%. The remaining 5% is still things that are important and that I cannot avoid getting by the Postal Service. Of course, you will reduce that file cabinet problem. And since you're going to be paying those bills online, most likely with a credit card, you'll be able to collect points and miles. Now, you got to watch out for the few service providers that will charge you a convenience fee when using a credit card. So in this case, you still have to use either an e-check or simply mailing them something. And of course, you're going to feel good about the environments. Another benefit of going paperless is that now if you have electronic records, you'll be able to search them, view them, and search them a lot more easily because they are electronic. And also because they are electronic, it's a lot easier to provide a copy of something to a third party. Now, watch out here, don't send a bank statement to a third party via email. I'm sure you know that email is not a secure means of communications, but I'm not going to get into those details. You will be able to sign a document electronically so that you don't have to print something, scan something, print, sign, and then scan so you can send it back. There are different aspects of signing a document electronically. You can do it with a previously scanned handwritten signature, or you can use a digital signature using a digital certificate. So basically, you are eliminating the print, sign, and scan routine. Because your documents are now going to be electronic, it's a lot easier to perform a backup of those documents, okay? Something that you can't do with all that paper in a file cabinet because you're obviously not going to photocopy everything that's in your file cabinet. Now, this sounds all good, but there are some drawbacks to going paperless. So let me start talking about those. That's one aspect that my wife is having trouble getting her head around, is that she no longer has the secure feeling of holding a piece of paper. For me, that's not a problem, but maybe for some of you, it might be. So you have to consider that. Obviously, if you have a power outage, you can't access those documents. If your computer is down, same problem. If it's damaged or stolen, same problem and even worse, okay? And maybe this is not a real problem for this audience here, but it obviously requires you to be comfortable with technology since you'll be doing everything on the computer, online, and so on. So you have to be comfortable, but hopefully this is not an issue. You have to be orderly as well. Just because you're going from paper to electronic is not going to solve the mess. If you are not an orderly person, you're simply going to go from a paper mess to an electronic mess. Things are not going to get orderly just magically. You still have to be careful. It requires downloading your statements regularly. You can't simply, when you have paper statements, you may accumulate them in the corner of your desk until you have time to deal with them. And they'll just wait for you. They'll still be there. If you wait too long to download your statements, they may not be available anymore. If you wait 6 months or whatever, how long your service provider may keep bills and statements. So you have to do that regularly. You have to plan for keeping all those records electronically, and I'll go into the details for that. It requires a backup. This is mandatory and not optional. Why am I saying this? Now that all your statements and bills and whatnot are going to be electronic, you need to have a backup should something drastic happen and you lose the content of your computer. Okay, so a backup is absolutely mandatory. Preferably that backup is going to be somewhere remote, not in your house. I realize that it's not necessarily practical for everyone, but that's the best backup, is to have it outside your house, outside your home. So you have to have security for that remote backup. PDF, which is the most commonly used format, obviously has some levels of security to be able to deal with that. You can also use disk encryption, whether it's Windows 10 Pro or on Mac OS, you have an option. Some people will mention that there's always the issue, is the PDF format going to be there in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I cannot answer that question, obviously, and that is open for debate, but it's been around for probably 20, 25 years, and I would venture a guess that it's going to be around for a while longer, okay? But of course, you have to watch for that, and maybe in 10 years or so, when you realize that a new format comes into play and becomes the standard for documents, maybe you have to think about converting or migrating. So how do you get started? You have to make a list of your existing service providers. And I say service in quotes here because it's a very generic concept, okay? I will go through that list with you. You can have assets, you can have income, you can have taxes, bills, health insurance, other forms of insurance, travel and rewards, maintenance in a very generic sense. All those things are just examples of what you need to plan for. So you need to plan that routine and how you will be dealing with all those electronic statements. You have to organize your computer folders, and I will show that in a later slide how you can do that. So let's go through each of those types of service providers that I mentioned here. Let's start with assets. And again, those are just examples of assets. You may have more than you can think of for your personal situation. Obviously, bank accounts with check images, investment and brokerage accounts, college savings account, may not be for yourself, but it could be for your children or your grandchildren. 401ks, IRAs, savings bonds, social security statements. I'm not talking about your social security payments. If you're not retired yet, or if you're not collecting social security yet, you still have an annual statement that you should download from the Social Security Administration website. You may have a PayPal or a Venmo account. If you're not familiar with Venmo, it's what most millennials use, very similar to PayPal, and it's actually owned by PayPal. And you can probably think of many more. The next category would be income. Employer pay stubs, if you're still working. Retirement pensions, if you've retired. Social security benefits, consulting fees, royalties, interest, dividends, annuities, alimony. Again, examples. I'm sure you can come up with another type of income. Taxes. Again, a few examples. Tax forms, W-2s, 1099, for interest or dividend, for other kinds of benefits. 1098-T, which if you're not familiar is when you pay those college tuition, you get a 1098-T from the university or college. 1099-K if you have a business, and so on. In terms of tax returns, you also, still in terms of taxes, you need to collect your tax returns. Most people do e-file, but you still need to keep that tax return in PDF format or something else. If you do donations to charity, you may want to keep track of what you've been donating. Flexible spending accounts, if you're still working and you put some money, which is pre-tax, so that can be used to pay medical bills or other things, and so on. Next category is bills. Bank and store credit cards, so you're going to get a bill each month. That's one type. Your rent or your mortgage, your real estate taxes, your landline and wireless phone service, cable TV and internet service, power company, whether it's gas or electric. If you don't live in a house, but you live in a co-op or condo, you may have maintenance charges, You may be billed separately for water, and so on. Plenty of examples of bills, subscription for newspapers or other things. So all those bills can come in. Regarding insurance, home and auto policies, medical centers and hospitals, doctors, dentists, you name it, all those examples of insurance and documents that you may be getting now on paper will be coming now electronically. Long-term insurance, personal liability insurance, and so on. Travel and rewards, excuse me, toll tags, travel. In the Northeast, it's Easy Pass. Anywhere else in the country, it's called something else. But you know what I'm talking about. Airline miles, if you're a frequent traveler, you want to keep track, or credit card points, and so on. Gift card, hotel points, store points, you name it. You get the idea. Maintenance, credit reports. Yes, you can get your free credit report once a year on annualcreditreport.com. By the way, that's required by law that you be able to get one free credit report per credit bureau per year, but you can get it a lot more often on creditkarma.com. Okay. Home improvement, lawn care, car maintenance, you name it, all kinds of things that you may need to keep. What if you can't get all that information online? What should you do? So should you file those papers in the cabinet? Should you scan the documents? Should you keep the documents you scan? Those are considerations that you need to take into account on how you organize yourself with those sources of documents that cannot be obtained electronically. What if you can get it online? And hopefully that's the case for most everything. My recommendation would be that you download all your statements as far back as possible, because it doesn't take much space to keep electronic documents. So it's not like you have to limit yourself as what you would normally do if you store everything in your file cabinet. You can probably get rid of the corresponding paper version if you can download everything electronically. But if you're starting to do this for the first time, you need to be able to retrieve those online documents. So you're going to have to create an account, choose a username, set a secure password, and secure can mean a lot of things. Obviously, password security means that it's a password that's easy to remember for you, but hard to guess for anybody else. If you're like me and you have close to 200 online accounts all over the place for this or that and other things, you need a password manager. I will not go into the details on what that entails, but just one more thing that you need to take into consideration. Still talking about security, you need to turn on 2FA, two-factor authentication, if it's available. And hopefully it's available for all the things that that you need to get online documents from. If it's not available, I would highly suggest that you complain. Not having two-factor authentication available in this day and age is not a good thing. And your service provider should be told in very clear terms that they should provide it. You may have to select the option for paperless after creating that online account. It may not be an automatic thing. And then you have to select the download format. For most documents, it's going to be PDF, but it doesn't have to be. Now you need to plan that routine. So you may need to set reminders for yourself, especially if you're not getting a regular email telling you that this bill or that statement is available. So for the others, when you're not getting the reminder, the email reminder, you need to set a reminder for yourself to do things. you need to prepare an overall folder on your computer for all your downloads, and you're going to have plenty. Given the list of examples I've given you, you get the idea that that folder is going to contain a lot of subfolders. I would recommend that you use at least one subfolder per provider, and further down, one subfolder per year, because most likely you're going to have a document, a statement, a bill, whatever, per month. So it's easier if you do it that way. Now, this is just what I've been doing. I will show you what it looks like, but if you find a different way of doing things that works better for you, be my guest. If you are using Firefox, there's a big advantage to using Firefox as your browser. It's because it remembers the download folder per website. And that happened since version 22 or so in 2013. Now, that's a huge advantage because when you download a document from a particular website, you don't have to navigate to the proper folder. It's already there for you. It's going to present you with the folder where you want to download that particular document. Of course, if you download two statements for two different credit cards from the same credit card provider, you're going to have to navigate. But in any case, Firefox, as far as I know, is the only browser that has that capability. I'm not aware of any other browser that can do this. And it's available on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, so that should cover everything. It's also available on smartphones, but I don't think you're going to want to download any bills or statements on your smartphone. So what about setting reminders? How are you going to do this? You can use an online calendar. I use Google for my calendars. I say calendars with an S because, yes, I do have multiple Gmail accounts. And those calendars synchronize to my smartphone and my computer, so everything is always up to date regardless of where I look. If you don't want to use an online calendar, you can use your phone calendar app, assuming you have a smartphone. Then it's going to be local to your phone only, and that's all available on both iOS and Android phones. You can use a calendaring application. That's what I happen to use. I use Thunderbird with Lightning, and it synchronizes with my online calendars, my Google calendars, but you can also use it locally without having to synchronize with the cloud if you don't feel comfortable doing that. If you still don't like using a calendaring application, you can use sticky notes, which is the equivalent, the electronic version of a sticky that you would stick to your screen or any place else. That's for Windows, and on the Mac or iOS, it's the Notes app, which would be the equivalent. The whole point here is that you use something to set yourself reminders to do what you need to do on a regular basis. Of course, as a last resort, but that's really a last resort, you could use a paper calendar, but that would sort of defeat the purpose of going paperless, wouldn't it? So, how would you organize yourself? You have to name your folders intelligently. What do I mean by that? For example, if you have a credit card, you would call it, from Citibank, you would call it Citi CC John, or Chase CC Jane, if you have multiple credit cards, one for you, one for your spouse. The one thing you don't want to do is simply call it credit card, unless you really have one credit card. But otherwise, I still don't recommend it. It's better to be a little more specific. So that's for the folders. You also need to name your files intelligently. What does that mean? For example, in my area, in the Northeast, Con Edison is the utility provider. So my Con Edison statements for my electric and gas bills are called in this fashion, or named in this fashion. Now, you notice that I use the international date format. I don't say month, day, year. I use year, month, day. Now, that has advantages because when you sort your files alphabetically, which is the default, they will also be sorted chronologically, which is really what you want. If you were to use month, day, year, that wouldn't be the case. So you're going to say, if I have the service provider name in the folder, why repeat it in the file name? That's a very good question, and the reason is actually twofold. Folder security, what do I mean by that? If you are not using Firefox, or even if you are, when you download that bill or statement, showing the name of the folder or seeing files already in that folder before you download the new one will confirm that you are in the proper folder to save your file. So that is especially useful if you're not using Firefox, that would not remember. If you're using a different browser than Firefox, that would not remember the download folder on a per website basis. So that's for what I call folder safety. But it's also file safety. Should something go drastically wrong and you need to recover data off your hard drive, you may see the file name using some recovery tool, some recovery utility. You may see the file name, but you may not know where that file is. So by having also the service provider name in the file name, then you will know where it has to go when you reorganized your recovered data. So it's what I call file safety. To be even safer, you need to keep all those records on a separate computer, meaning not the one that you normally go on the web and shop, because the one that you go on the web with could potentially be more vulnerable because you're going on the web. So it's a little safer. I'm not saying it's always practical to do so, but that's what I do. I actually store those records on a different computer. It's better to store all those documents on the desktop rather than a laptop because it's less likely to be stolen. Obviously, you don't want your only source of those electronic documents to be stolen. So what would that layout be on your hard drive? I call the master folder, I call it finances. You can call it anything you want. And then under finances, I have the various service providers, and under each of them, I have the date. I'm sorry, the year. And then under each year folder, I have the various files. So overall, that's what it would look like. Of course, the tree structure would be a lot more complex if I were to show you everything, but you get the idea of what it can look like. You can make up your own tree structure. I'm not saying this is the panacea, but if you had no idea how to get started, this is a good way to get started. How do you pay bills online? If you haven't done it so far, and you're only starting, you're going to need to create an account with the service provider, choose a username, choose a secure password. We talked about that already. Some password, some of the fields might be remembered by your browser or not all, and it will be up to you whether you want to remember the password. Again, I'm not going to recommend one way or the other, but I do save my password because I save all my password in the Firefox password vault. And of course, I use a master password to protect all the passwords. So the master password has to be a very long and complex password. You have to pay on a secure website. There's absolutely no way you would consider entering a password or entering a credit card information on a website that is not secure. And secure means HTTPS and a valid certificate. Just having HTTPS in the URL is not enough to ensure a secure website. I have seen, unfortunately, many service providers assuring me, oh, don't worry, our website is secure. Well, the problem is that their website is not truly secure because some components on the web page are not, and that breaks the security for the entire page. So don't let them get away with that, and complain loudly if it's not secure. If you don't see that lock, that padlock symbol near the URL, in the URL bar. So capturing an online document. What if there is no way to download a document? Examples are check images for your bank. Now that banks do not send you the checks back, if you want to keep a record of it, you have to download the check image. We will make the check image available online, but in the case of my bank, it's just a picture that they display in a separate web page. So you have to somehow download it. But if it's the document itself, like the statement, that's not available, you have to complain. This is not acceptable in 2019 not to be able to download the statement or a bill. But if you really can't get it, the solution is to use a PDF printer for if you're using Windows on a PC, or use export to PDF if you're using a Mac. If you're using Linux or any other any flavors of Linux, I'm not an expert on that, but I'm sure there are equivalent ways of capturing the content of a web page. In terms of PDF printers, the one that I use 98% of the time is PDF Creator, not to be confused with PDF Creator 2 words. They're not the same software. For that matter, the one with 2 words is not free. The one with 1 word is free. I also use Primo PDF, but there are others, Nitro PDF, Qt PDF, and of course the ubiquitous Microsoft Print to PDF, which comes built into Windows. Now you're going to say, why use PDF Creator if there is Microsoft Print to PDF? Well, that's because I started using PDF Creator years ago, long before there was a Microsoft Print to PDF. So, and I'm very familiar with its capability. I like what it can do, something that Microsoft Print to PDF cannot do. The reason I sometimes use Primo PDF is if I need to download a PDF but append it to an existing file as opposed to override it. Primo PDF allows me to do that. PDF Creator doesn't have that capability. So overall, using a PDF printer is useful for capturing check images, as I mentioned earlier. In my case, I can't download the image, so I capture it with a PDF printer. I mentioned at the very beginning that you need to have a backup plan. So I'm hoping you have a backup plan, right? This is not optional. This is absolutely mandatory. You're going to have all your financial documents in electronic format. You cannot afford to lose that, okay? So you need to have a backup. As I mentioned also earlier, the best backup is a backup that's outside of your home, whether it's in the cloud with security, whether it's on a computer at a relative, still with security, on a USB disk at a friend or neighbor, a disk that you keep swapping back and forth with a copy in your home. No matter what, you get the gist. Everything has to be with security. No matter what form of backup, it has to be with security. Even in the cloud, it's best if you use a cloud provider that allows you to choose your own password. Not many cloud providers allow this, but it's best that it be encrypted with your own key as opposed to theirs, so that a rogue employee cannot access your data. A rogue employee of the cloud provider, that is. So hopefully you do have a backup plan now. Let's talk about how long you need to keep those records. Just because you're going from paper to electronic doesn't mean you don't need to keep records for a while. So for how long? Well, the short answer is it depends, because it all depends on what kind of document you're talking about. The long answer is that, unfortunately, I am not the expert on that topic, so you need to refer to someone who knows better. In any case, the general rule is that because you're keeping electronic records, it's a lot easier to keep them for longer than you would do for paper records. Usually, you want to get rid of your paper records because they're taking a lot of room in your file cabinet. You no longer have that problem. So if you need to keep your electronics record for longer than what's required by law or not by law, it's okay, because it's not going to take that much room. 7 years is a number that's often mentioned, sometimes 10 even, but there are a few records that you need to keep for longer than this. Examples: home improvement. If you make home improvements to your home, which you're going to sell 20, 30 years down the road, obviously the 7 years or 10 years doesn't apply. You need to keep those records for a lot longer, as long as you still own your house, so that you can claim whatever tax benefits there is. If you have stocks, obviously, once you sell it, could be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years later, you need to have those records so that you can appropriately do your taxes when you sell them. You get the idea. The general rule is that it depends. So what do you do with these old paper documents that you can't download? Examples: birth certificate, home deed or title, wills, and so on. This is something that you have to decide on your own. Whoever requests from you to show those documents may not accept a digital copy. Okay? They may only accept the original. That does not mean that you should not scan them, because, for safety's sake, just in case, and sometimes somebody who requested may be fine with a copy. So it depends. That's something that you have to decide. Obviously, if you search scanned documents, which are a lot easier than searching through paper, to be able to search that scanned documents, you're going to need OCR, optical character recognition, when you scan the documents. Otherwise, you won't be able to search anything. I'm just mentioning that in passing. So what do you do with all that paper that you've been collecting, and now you've downloaded, you went back online and you've downloaded many, many years of statements? What do you do with it? The ones that you no longer need to keep on paper. Should you simply throw it in the garbage? Nah, that doesn't look like a good idea, does it? Should you shred it? Yeah, probably would be fine. Should you burn it? Well, if you really care about completely destroying it because you consider those documents to be too confidential, that would be fine. Should you recycle that paper? No way. No way, for obvious security reasons. Or you can do something else if you have the inclination to do so. You can choose to use different means of getting rid of that paper. But That's really up to you. Additional topics to consider. How to scan, which I'm obviously not going to get into it now. We don't have the time for this. You need to get a good naming convention for all those documents that you're scanning. I recommend a similar naming convention that what I was describing for downloading your documents. Which format should you scan into? By default, it could be JPEG, depending on your scanner and the scanner software. That's not the most appropriate. PDF is better for at least one big reason. A JPEG can only contain one picture at a time. PDF can contain several pages. So that would be a big reason to scan to PDF if your software allows it. Which resolution to use when you scan? Don't go lower than 300 dpi, dot per inch, if you want to be able to reprint those documents or even read them. Don't go higher than 600 because the size of the file that you scan, I'm sorry, the size of the document after you scan that document, size of the file will grow as you increase the resolution. So pick something between 300 and 600. I use 300, and that's usually fine for text documents. If you have a document feeder on your scanner, take advantage of it. It will be a lot faster to scan multiple pages. If you don't have a scanner or if you don't have an all-in-one printer, you can use your smartphone or your tablet. There's an app which is available on both iOS and Android called PhotoScan, which can do a very good job at letting you take 4 quick pictures, and it will automatically adjust the 4 pictures to make a document by getting rid of the extra junk around the document. So if you need to take a picture of something that's rectangular, which is usually the case for a paper document, it's very easy to get a quote-unquote clean cut of that document, or pictures for that matter. You can use the Neat scanners, but there are many other scanners out there, especially if you're using an all-in-one printer, whether it's Epson, HP, Brother, and whatever else. And that's it from me. I'll give the last few minutes for questions. John?
Lower my mic. Yeah, we had a question from a tablet owner as to what's their best procedure for storing and saving.
So somebody who doesn't have a computer or doesn't want to use the computer.
Doesn't have, yeah.
Doesn't have, okay. If the tablet has sufficient storage, you can download to the tablet. Usually, the amount of storage available on a tablet does not even come close to what can be made available on a computer. So you're going to have to think about this carefully because of space requirements. Keep in mind that a statement of a few pages, let's say a bank statement, is going to run you in PDF format around 300, 400, 500 kilobytes. So it's not that big. But if you're talking doing this for multiple banks, multiple years, and so on, you're definitely talking about a lot more space. And of course, a tablet being so much more vulnerable to being stolen, you absolutely need to have a backup plan. Okay, you cannot afford to store the only copy of those financial documents on the tablet.
Now, So you would recommend then that they would have to use cloud storage.
They would have to use cloud storage at a minimum. Some newer tablets have the ability to connect, those that have a USB-C connector, not a USB A or B, I keep forgetting which is which, but the older USB connector. If you have a newer tablet with a USB-C connector, you can connect an external drive to it, or USB key for that matter. And therefore, you can offload to that external storage. That would be another possibility.
That's good, because that was kind of what they wanted. Question came up about scanner recommendations. You know, you mentioned some of the name brand, but do you have scanners that do a better job of scanning so that they're clear to read? Somebody said, what about the Fujitsu Scan Snap?
So my experience is with all-in-one printers that contain a scanner. At 300 DPI, I have absolutely no problem reading anything that I scanned. If you want to test it for yourself and you find that 300, if you blow it up, is not enough, go to 400, 600. But I would find it to be wasteful to go higher than 600 for documents that are 99% text. Okay? If the logo of the company is not quite legible, who cares? Okay? What's important is the text information. So 600 should be absolutely plenty fine to scan. Now, I don't think you don't need to buy an expensive scanner for doing this. Okay? Absolutely not. Don't waste your money on that. An all-in-one printer, whether it's from Epson, HP, Brother, Canon, or Fujitsu, or whatever, will do the job just fine. And those can go up to 1200 DPI should you want to really scan this high. Again, I do not recommend. So there is, and those all-in-one printers, $100 is not uncommon. So don't go spending a lot of money on a scanner, on a professional scanner. You don't need it.
For somebody who would want to begin to do this, they might, get scared off because I have all of these back documents of paper that I'd have to scan. It just looks overwhelming. Would you recommend just saying, start today, move forward, and then as you can, backtrack and start converting the paper stuff into paperless?
Yes, you basically outline what I was about to suggest, but let me add a little bit to that. When I started in 2007, I didn't go all paperless from one day to the next. I did it on a per service provider basis. Okay, I might have started with 5 or 6 right off the bat, but not 25. Okay, and gradually, if I was able to download previous years of statement, I did that. But if that was not available, what I would recommend, if that is not available, what I would recommend is, okay, you start, let's say, January 1st, 2020, you start going paperless. Okay, so you still have all your paper statements for 2019, 18, 17, 16, or however long you want to keep them. But you start in 2020 with electronic statements. You start downloading them regularly each month in electronic format. You still keep your paper statement for the prior years. Once you have accumulated enough years of electronic statements, and you feel like, I don't need to keep those things, they're older than X years, I'm not specifying what X is, then get rid of the paper the same way you would get rid of the paper before anyhow. So you can do this gradually. You don't have to go, you know, from one day to the next being completely electronic. It can be gradual.
I think that sounds more doable than saying, oh, I've got to recover 7 years worth of paper. And,
no, you don't have to do that.
Good. You know, start doing one and then backtrack and get rid of the files from 7 years ago.
It can be a very gradual process. It doesn't have to be, you know, like you flipping a switch.
Perfect. I think you've given a lot of good advice and thought. The only one that I thought of when you mentioned it was the burning part. And my in-laws were talking about burning their trash and stuff, and they were told by the local refuge hauler that you got to be careful. EPA doesn't like you burning stuff. So if you burn the wrong things, you might get a big fine for it.
Yes. So if you want to go to a professional shredder, and some municipalities will actually have a shredder day, I'm going to call it that because I forget what they call it, where you can bring, you know, piles of paper to be shredded in professional shredders, and those, you can't recover anything out of those. The consumer grade shredders are not that good, okay, because the strip of paper that they cut a piece of paper into, they're not thin enough. So if you really want professional grade shredders, find out from your municipality where you can do that.